Hey, good morning, everyone again. So we have to move on the Gemara, even though I was listening to my recording from my last show and it was marginally incoherent. I was a little tired, and so was everyone else who was attending. So I apologise that the last show wasn't my finest hour, but I think we crawled to the end line as far as I was concerned and what I wanted to say on Tosus, and I want to move on to Eisa Abaye Rabba. Meducha Yesh Shum metaltanosav im lav ein metaltanosav. So the Rabba is Abaye, is asking of Rabba a question. Rabba has been mechadesh that a kli shemelachot l'isa is mutter l'tzorech gufay, and on that Abaye wishes to prove that a kli shemelachot l'isa is not mutter l'tzorech gufay, and the evidence he brings is that Meducha, this I don't know exactly what it is, it's garlic press or something of the sort. If it doesn't have the Shum in it, ein metaltanosav, you can't move it, from which you see that you can't move a kli shemelachot l'isa. So goes Abaye's proof. The Rishonim already point out a number of things. First of all, that Abaye's question is from the Sefer, not from the ratio of this statement. It's not that when it has Shum in it, you can move it. That's the problem. The problem is when it doesn't have Shum in it, you can't move it, and it doesn't have a garlic in it, you can't move it. From which you see kli shemelachot l'isa, it can't be moved against Rabba's principle that kli shemelachot l'isa can be moved. That's the first thing they point out. The second thing they point out is that possibly Abaye himself really agrees with Rabba. He's just trying to explore and understand the topic. There is evidence later that Abaye also holds that kli shemelachot l'isa is mutter l'tzorech gufay. So Rishonim say either he accepts Rabba's answer to the question, or he himself also held this but was genuinely unsure what to make of this brisa and therefore wanted to hear Rabba's answer to it, or even he knew this answer but wanted to see if Rabba had any other answers to it. So this very often when you see A asking a question on B, it's because A argues with B, but in this particular case, the Rishonim don't take that on. They believe this is the view of both Rabba and Abaye. So basically, we now have a machlokas between Rav Yehuda, who holds that kli shemelachot l'isa is also l'tzorech gufay, and Rabba, and turns out Abaye also holds that kli shemelachot l'isa is mutter l'tzorech gufay. I'm going to avoid talking about the Sochem Koma. I made that mistake in the last year and slipped into that. Let's keep the two separate, even though at least in Rav Yehuda's world, the two go together. In other words, if the l'tzorech gufay is also, as Rashi points out, the Sochem Koma is also also. Finally, we have Tosis's view that even Rav Yehuda agrees that the l'tzorech gufay is mutter, and the only reason why earlier Rav Yehuda argued on the Mishnah is because he held it was melacha gerua. He held it was an inferior melacha, and therefore it held in that scenario the l'tzorech gufay is mutter. So is asa. So just to summarize, in the simplest reading, the Gemara, Rav Yehuda holds kli shemelachot l'isa is also l'tzorech gufay, and Rabba and Abaye also, it turns out, holds l'tzorech gufay is mutter by kli shemelachot l'isa. Tosfos argues that even Rav Yehuda agrees that the l'tzorech gufay is mutter by kli shemelachot l'isa, and he just argues where it's a melacha gerua. Either way, Abaye asks on this view that the l'tzorech gufay is mutter for kli shemelachot l'isa, so why should Meducha shel Shum be asa l'taltel? By the way, Abaye doesn't ask this question on Rav Yehuda. Now, if you learn Rav Yehuda in the simplest way, the reason he doesn't ask it on Rav Yehuda is because this is evidence for Rav Yehuda. You have explicitly a brisa that says that kli shemelachot l'isa is asa, in which case it's derived for Rav Yehuda. If you learn like Tosfos, who says that kli shemelachot l'isa, even Rav Yehuda agrees, is mutter l'taltel, l'tzorech gufay, and it's only when it's melacha gerua or not, the chora, this brisa is the same question on Rav Yehuda as it is on Rabba, which is why does the brisa say you can't move the garlic press, also the taltel? It should have specified you can't move it unless it's a l'tzorech gufay, or you can't move it for gerua, but you can move it for anything else. So you have the same question on Rav Yehuda as you have on Rabba. Why is Abaye picking a fight on Rabba with Rabba, saying, you'll just be machadish that kli shemelachot l'isa is mutter l'tzorech gufay? What's he do with the brisa? The question is neutral, irrespective of whether you agree to Rabba or Rav Yehuda. You have the same problem from the brisa. So we would have to answer, and I don't really know what this answer means, that Meducha also is a melachot grua. Now, it brings out what I was sort of, in my previous overtired here, was trying to mess around with. I don't really know what melachot grua means. I don't know what defines melachot grua in the last line of Tosfos. I don't know why he says melachot grua doesn't apply to these things. Despite marginal incoherence in my previous year, the basic idea I came across, which is I was confused about exactly how to define melachot grua, and I remain confused over here. So the mathematical answer to the question, I guess, would be that this would just be another example of melachot grua. I don't really know what defines melachot grua, and we will move on from that. I don't have much else to say. Okay, so that's the cheshbon, the maths of the sugya. Rabbi's mechadish that you can move klish melachot l'issa. So Kufay asks Abaya, you have a brisa and a first brisa that says not like that in the safe of the brisa, in the second half of the brisa. The Meducha is also, it can't say asa l'taltel, it should have at least specified mutter l'taltel l'sorach Kufay. And according to Tosfos, in theory, we could have asked the same question of Rabbi Yehuda and would have had to answer melachot grua. That's the maths of the sugya. What the Rishonim now busy themselves with is the first part of the brisa, the ratio of the brisa, because the ratio of the brisa says that you can move a kli shemelachot l'issa when it has a shum inside it. That's the first half of the brisa. Even though it's a kli shemelachot l'issa, you can move it because when it has garlic inside it. Now, this is one of the very, very important Mara Makomis, even though it's just a half liner in the Gemara over here. And really, the Gemara is bringing it because of the second half, not the first half. Nonetheless, it's one of the very important Marmakomas around the sugya of bosses, which we touched upon when we learnt mem based on onwards. So just briefly to summarize, what this Gemara seems to tell us is that the presence of the shum, the garlic inside the kli shemelachot l'issa, somehow allows it to be moved. And this reminds us of the Gemara of the mace, the dead body, which was on the mitzvah, and you had to move the body out in order to save it, or mechamal itself, because it's getting sunburnt, it's getting wrong expression, ruined by this rotting because of the sun. And the Gemara there says that one of the solutions to moving it is by putting a non-Muktza kicker or tinuk on the mitzvah, and somehow magically you can move the stretcher. If there's a loaf of bread or a child also sitting on the, you can put them on yes, exactly, on Shabbos you can put the yes. So there's a number of questions that spring to mind around this heta. Is this the general heta or somehow only a heta with a mace? Does it help only with the kicker tinuk or even other things? Is it only on Shabbos that you can do it? Is it only on Erev Shabbos you can do it, or even on Shabbos that you can do this as a solution? If it does help, is it a l'chatchila eitzah or a b'diavad eitzah? What sort of muksas does it help for? Our Gemara only says it helps for kli shemelachot l'issa. Does it even help for worse forms of muktzah? So these are the sort of whole plethora of questions that spring to mind when you read the first half of the brisa. First half of the brisa says you can move the meducha, you can move the press because it has shum inside. What's the basis of that heta? Is it a general heta that we can extend to other scenarios or not? And what's the extent of that heta? How lachatchila is it? Can you even do it on Shabbos? These are all the questions that spring to mind. And this Rabbizobin is an exceptionally important source, halacha l'maisa. So around this is going to spring all the questions that we left unresolved last time. When we learned last time about this idea of putting kicker tinuk, we alluded to the idea of, does it help to put my Zemiros books on my tray that has the candlesticks in order to allow me to move the candlesticks off the tray on Shabbos? How much do all these things help? And I sort of said, let's put this on hold because we're waiting for this sugya over here. This is the sugya where all these children spring to life in a very, very important way. And there's immense impact on practical halacha from the sugya. So we are going to take this sugya a little bit la halacha. But before that, we have a long road to journey of working through the Rishonim. Yeah, sorry.
So it seems that we are, from your explanation so far, we're trying to are going to understand this, as you said, the idea of buses.
No, or not. Or they may say this whole Gemara is irrelevant.
Right.
Sorry, I don't mean to. Yeah, I'm saying when you read this Gemara, it reminds you of that sugya of putting a kick on a tinuk, but we'll see that there's a very significant body of Rishonim who don't think the two sugyas are connected.
We were considering the idea of my house is just at the refunctionized fleet. We've got
You may well be right. There may be other ways of reading Gemara. So again, thank you for allowing me to clarify this. All I said is it reminds one of that sugya and therefore raises this whole plethora of questions. It may be that in fact there's a completely different ondas that work over here, which we'll see that many of the Rishonim say. Yeah. Yeah.
Given that we end up saying this is
Yes. Yes.
It's going to be hard to see how the different idea are, but it would be easier to see how they're repurposing it to a new touch.
It's a very, very fine point, and we'll get to that also. If it is kicker or tinuk, then it's teaching us an even bigger chiddush that kicker tinuk helps even to the equivalent of tashmishay. A remarkable idea, yeah. But we'll get to that. Let's put the second half of Nechemia on hold. The point made is a very valid point, but I just don't want to confuse us for now. So let's deal with that as we get to Nechemia. But yes, it's a very fine point. Okay. So sorry, yeah.
I think I was going to say the same thing, but just to say, so that sort of tashmisho is wide enough to extend to acting as a basis.
Acting as a positive basis, a basis that removes a muktzah. If our sugya is a sugya of allowing a keli to be moved when it becomes a positive basis, when it becomes a basis for something non-muktzah, then it would be a raya that, according to Nechemia, that's called tzorich tashmisha. Yes. Yes, it's a very, very fine point. In fact, it's Rabbi Kivega's point, and it ends up again as very impactful in practical halacha. Even though we don't paskin like Rav Nechemia, nonetheless, you see how far being a basis for something non-mukta can demuktify something potentially, and therefore it's a very important. It's a very important source. Yes, so this would even be called a zotosh misha.
I guess the question that comes to mind is they picked it as the example of moving garlic, which is what the kali was for its isur use, whereas you might have thought one may pick moving something that was unrelated to its isur use.
Yes, so the Rishonim that distance this from kikar and tinuk has come from exactly your point. They say it's not a coincidence that it picks Shum here rather than other things. Yes. I should say, by the way, I am aware that normally I wouldn't have given a share today because I haven't given people time to work through all these Rishonim. The reason I'm giving a share today, and I meant to say this at the beginning, is for very good reasons, but unfortunately I'm not able to give a share this Wednesday night, nor am I able to give a share this Tuesday, nor my niece's wedding. Then next Sunday and next Tuesday I'm away, I'm out of the country. So that's why I'm giving this share, even though I appreciate in a sense I'm speaking ahead of everyone having seen the Rishonim. But I'm delighted to hear that through everyone's own reasoning, they've arrived at many of the points that the Rishonim make. So these are fantastic points. I actually also remind me at the end of the show, I want to explore the possibility of me either giving a one-off Zoom share on Thursday, and whether that could work within people's schedules, or perhaps just giving. No, Thursday, not Tuesday. No, yeah, from the Shabbat. We're not invited to Shabbat Thursday night. In case my brother-in-law ever watches this video, that's fine. We're not upset. So I wanted to just explore whether I could do a one-off share by Zoom, or maybe next week from out as well, a one-off share by Zoom, just because it's not helpful. It's convenient to go away just when we begin a new circuit, and it doesn't matter, but it just happens to be inconveniently timed. So I apologize. Yeah.
We're going to be so similar to what Zach said. Is this Shum already chopped up, or is the whole Shum? Because it would seem that actually, if it's a Kli Shmata L'Isur and it's a whole Shum, and it was what you could actually do the Isur with, then you would always think Kal V'chomer you shouldn't be allowed to use it because you're going to be even more likely to do.
Right. So if Muktza, but by the way, I've avoided really interestingly here speaking about what Muktza is, and is Muktza because of a fear of ending up doing a melacha, or is it something else? I'm avoiding that because I want us to sort of accumulate evidence over the sugyas, and then we'll try and step back and work out what Muktza is. Yeah. Okay, there is Rishonim that think that the Shum here is dafka, not just because of a sort of a reverse bosset type svara, but because this is the very functionality of the keli, as Zach just said. It seems to, I think, they don't spell this out, but I think they're assuming it's already ground Shum, and that's the whole point. That after you grind Shum, it sits there in the Meducha. I don't know exactly what this Meducha is, but it sits there, and then you use it to, to do things with. And again, I can't emphasize how halacha l'maisa all of this is, right? We do have versions of this to this day, pepper grinders and things like that. So it's a klishim nachta. Isn't grinding pepper on Shabbos is very clearly asa. But if I've already ground some pepper, am I allowed to shake it out of the pepper? What's it called? Not a salt cellar and a pepper mill. Pepper mill. Thank you. Yeah. I'm allowed to shake it out of the pepper mill on Shabbos or not. So yeah. So this it's a funny thing, but I can't stress how halacha l'maisa, how important halachic source this first line of the brayso is. Okay, so that's opening the topic. The next maramokum that we need to see is the one that I printed on in source 3, which is the Gemara and Kuf Mem based on the base, because all the Rishonim reference this Gemara, and basically the takeaway of this Gemara is is the Gemara, is the context which I didn't print, is a Gemara that's discussing ways to move valuable objects left in the Reshus HaRabim or in a chotzer. So I accidentally leave an object in a chotzer before Shabbos and I want to move it into a safe space. So Gemara is talking about ways and means to move it. And then the Gemara says all of this is in a case where there's no bossis considerations, Muktza considerations. In the case of Muktza consideration, none of these eitzes help because it doesn't help with Muktza to put a kicker on or tinuk on top of a bossis for Muktza. Why doesn't it help? Because the whole heter of kicker and tinuk is only with a mace. Right? So there seems to be an explicit Gemara. The punchline words that you need to know are Lo omru kiko tinuk elo lemeit bilvad, lemeis bilvad. The very last lines in the quote that I printed there in source 3 is Lo omru kiko tinuk elo lemeis bilvad. Translation, this is source 3 in the new sources that I gave out. Yes, it's a Gemara and Kufman based on the base. And again, I apologize. I appreciate the Shiur is not well timed, but I have no choice. When you work through the Shonim, and I appreciate people haven't yet had the chance to do this fully, but when you work through the Shonim, I started the sukkah by introducing it by raising a series of abstract questions. That's not how the Rishonim operate. They start off by asking a stira in the sukkah. And basically they phrase their discussion as follows. In our sukkah, it appears to be the case that having a non-Muktza item placed inside the Meducha helps allow you to move it, helps somehow demuktify it in some shape or form. But in the Gemara in Kufman based on the base says, no, kikar tinuk only helps lo omru kikar tinuk elon a mace bilvad. So we've met kikar tinuk on Daf Mem Gimel on a base, and I gave you that source Mem Gimel base, reminded you about the Gemara that we had learned. And now we have another Gemara in Kufman based on the base who says that this eitzah, this solution, only helps with a mate, only helps with a dead body. So the Rishonim ask it as a stira effectively. Now, why would it only help with a mace? So Rashi says, Mishum kavat habrius. Normally, putting a non-Muktza item on top of a mitzvah wouldn't help. They made an exception with the mace because of kavat habrius, because of dignity of creatures. They didn't want the mace to deteriorate. Thank you. The Rambam says, and we did look at this Rambam last time when we learned it, that the basis of the heter is because of Adam Bahul al Meso. Because a person is under stress at the time of bereavement for obvious reasons, and therefore they were worried that if they didn't give an allowance, the person would end up just being Mechal Shabbos openly, and therefore they gave a get-out clause. We looked at this Rambam last time because if you remember, it was very difficult in the maths of the sukkah there. It seemed to be like an innovation of the Rambam that didn't read well into the sukkah there. The Gemara used the concept of Adam Bahul for something else, and the Rambam seems to apply it here also. Okay, but leaving aside those questions, basically the Gemara in the Kufman base on the base says that the allowance of kikar and tinok is an exception. It's only with a mate because of kavat habrius or because it's a time of stress. It's not a general allowance. So that's how the Rishonim phrase our sukkah. So just to summarize, because I don't want any of us to come back, this is not a confusing sukkah. This is not an overwhelming in this sense. The Gemara, for our purposes, we have a Gemara that says that a Meducha is klisha melachot le'isa, and nonetheless it can be moved when it has Shum inside. Your first thought may jump to, okay, this is an old trend. I know this topic. This is mace or is kikar tinuk, which we met previously. The Rishonim say that's not true. This is the Gemara explicitly says this is an exception. The allowance of kikar and tinuk is an exception in the case of a mace because of unique leniencies of mace. Okay, where is the sukkah going to go from here? It's basically going to fragment into two different paths. One school of thought is going to say, as Zach has said, as you said, that this is not a sukkah of tinuk and kikar. We when it triggered our memory of that sukkah, it confused us. It's not relevant, as we just demonstrated in the Gemara base. And we need to think completely differently. We need to think in line with Eliyahu's lamdas, with your lamdas. We need to think about functionality. And when it's got the shum inside, it's the very functionality of the object itself. And therefore, somehow that's what makes it non-Muktza because it's being used for a Muktza purpose. And that's the nature of the heter. The other school of thought will say, no, our Gemara is evident that even for other forms of Muktza, you can use kikar and tinuk as a solution. And if that's correct, this has massive ramifications for solving Shabbos problems, because in certain scenarios of Muktza, you can resolve the issue by putting a kikar or tinuk on it, and that will solve the problem. What do you do with the Gemara and Kufman base? We find a distinction, somehow we deal with the Gemara. So our sugya bifurcates into two very different schools of thought. One school of thought is massively important in the halacha because it tells us that even Muktza items, when their very use is non-Muktza, cease to be Muktza. And other school of thought tells us even Muktza items, when they have a non-Muktza item placed on them, somehow become non-Muktza in some specific way or form, which we'll have to work out the parameters of. So either reading the Gemara is going to be very, very important in practical halacha. So I'm just trying to lay out so that when you learn the Rishonim, where this goes. Now, where do we find these two schools of thought in the Rishonim? The school of thought that thinks that this is nothing to do with Kikkar and Tinuk is the Rashba, the Ritva, and I didn't print, but the Ran and the Ramban, all the very well-known names that we know. The school of thought that thinks that this is to do with Kikkar and Tinuk is an anonymously quoted Yesh Shapirshu. In the Chedush Rashba, he says Yesh mi Shapirshu. I put it in the bold. In the Ritva, he says Yesh Shapirshu. In the Bal Hamar, which I didn't bring the other rounds, is a Kavara Isiechon Mechachme Hadar. There's one of the Chachme Hadar. So there's some anonymous figure who's important enough for the Rishonim to engage with, who says, no, what's really going on is the sugya of Kikkar and Tinuk. So we have effectively a machlokas Rishonim over here. We have a Yesh Shapirshu. There's a school of thought floating around in the Bati Medrash of Spain and Provence, who argue that putting a non-Muktza item on top of the Meducha helps, and this can be extended as a general rule to other Muktza situations. All the well-known Rishonim, whose names we know here in the Sugya, like the Rashba and the Ritva and the Balamar, all argue with this school of thought, but it ends up as a Machlokas Rishonim. And we know who this anonymous Rishon, who they're citing is, because it turns out to be a Teshuvah of the Rosh. So we don't have a Rosh that we can print at the back of the Gemara that I can show you all, but this is a Teshuvah of the Rosh, a very, very significant halachist, who indeed says this other view, this anonymously quoted, Echad michachmei hadar shehite, and Yesh mi shapir and so on, it's the Rosh. And the Rosh makes its way into Shulchan Aruch. So one of the three pillars of Horah, one of the very, very important three pillars of Horah, and the Rosh, who is this anonymous figure cited and rejected by the Rashba, the Ram, the Ramban, the Ritva, the Ram. Almost every Rishon that we learn on the Daf, it enters Halacha as a very serious halachic voice, and I've printed that in source 10 when I brought the Shulchan Aruch and the Mishnah Berurah, La Halacha L'Maisa. So when you learn the Sugya, basically what I'm going to ask you to do is as follows: is to learn I didn't print all the Rishonim, the Rashba, the Ritva. I printed the Shitta L'Miyuchas L'Ran, which is source 9, which isn't the real Ran, but the anonymous Rishon that was ascribed to the Ran. What I'm going to ask you to do is basically treat this as a Machlokas Rishonim, and I'll learn the Yesh mi Shapirshu, this anonymous Yesh mi Shapirshu, seriously, not just as a rejected viewpoint, but a very real, important halachic viewpoint. Learn that and see what sense you can make of that. What lomdus would be going on over here conceptually, how on earth this makes sense, how it deals with the Sugya and Kufmem base, how it resolves the clash of Sugyas, how conceptually this could work, that somehow putting a non-Muktza item on top of a Muktza item detoxifies it, what that would mean. And then learn the other Rishonim who argue on it, the Rashba, the Ritva themselves, who reject this viewpoint, and how they're learning the Sugya and what they understand of the Sugya. Also look for subtleties or difference in these Rishonim. Even though I've basically aligned like two schools of thought, they're not all quite saying the same thing. So try and learn with subtlety the slightly different language of the Rishonim. And then finally look at the Meiri and the Miyuchas L'Ran, source 8 and 9, who bring yet a further way of thinking about things. So effectively we're going to emerge with three ways through the Sugya of how they understand the Heta of Shum and Meducha, either the Rosh, who's this anonymous Yesh mi Shapirshu, or the Rashba and Ritva and others, and then a third school of thought as quoted by the Meiri and the Ran, Miyuchas Ran, who give a third way of looking at it, and that will basically be our Sugya, how we learn the Sugya, and then we'll go into practical halacha. So that's the agenda for the next series of learning. I'll stop here for today because it's just a hakdama on the Sugya, and if people maybe can just let me know off group or just show of hands now. I mean, in principle, can anyone do Thursday night? Yeah. Okay. So who can't do it?
I can't, but whatever day you like.
Okay. Fine, I will upload the Zoom. Okay, so I will try and give a Zoom share either Thursday or sometime next week from Israel. I'll go back to you then with the time. But I think I've set a decent amount of. I hope I've set a decent amount of homework to give everyone busy. Not homework, sheer work, learning work. So yeah.
you do it.